All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's 1:30. My name is Jay Corpening. I'm privileged to serve as co-chair of COVID-19 Task Force, along with Senior Resident Superior Court Judge Don Bridges. With that, Emily, will you please call the roll of the membership?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Judge Corpening, we just heard from you, but I'll give you the opportunity to speak for the record.
Present.
Judge Bridges?
Present.
Judge Sermon? I don't see Judge Sermon's on yet. Judge Vincent?
Present.
Mr. West?
Present.
Mr. Evans? District Attorney Evans? Don't see you on the list yet. Clerk Johnson?
Here.
Clerk Johnson, I see you. It looks like you're muted. I just tried to unmute you.
I am present.
Tanya?
Present.
Clerk Shingari?
Present.
Kinsley?
Present.
Kelly Myers?
Present.
Jason Cheek? Mr. Cheek? I don't see you on the list. Jennifer Harjo?
Present.
Mr. Weed?
Present.
Mr. Keister? Mr. Keister? Don't see you present. And Sheriff Clemens? All right, Judge Bridges and Judge Corpening, that's everyone who's present now, but we will keep an eye out for people who may have joined late.
Excuse me, this is John McCabe. I am present. I didn't hear my name on the roll call, but I'm here.
I'm sorry, Mr. McCabe?
Yes.
Is that you?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Thank you. Apologies, sir.
No troubles.
And this is Judge Sermons. I'm on the call.
Judge Sermons has joined. Thank you very much, Judge Sermons.
All right, thank you, Emily. This is Jay Corpening again. Moving to approval of the December meeting minutes. The minutes were distributed to the members electronically by Ryan Boyce, Deputy Director of AOC. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is a member willing to make a motion to approve the minutes? If so, identify yourself and make your motion.
Vincent, I make a motion that we approve the minutes.
Thank you. Judge Vincent, second.
John
This is
McCabe,
Patrick
second.
Weed. I'll second.
All right, thank you. Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, Emily, I'll ask you to call the roll of membership to approve the minutes.
Sure. Once again, Judge Corpening,
I vote aye.
Judge Bridges,
I vote aye.
Judge Sermons, Judge Sermons,
Yeah, aye.
Judge Vincent,
Aye.
Mr. West,
Aye.
Mr. Evans? Mr. Evans still hasn't joined us. Clerk Johnson?
Aye.
Sorry, Clerk Johnson, I don't think we heard you.
Aye.
Tanya?
Aye.
Sorry, Tanya, I don't think we heard you.
Aye.
Thank you. Clerk Shingari?
Aye.
Not here yet.
Nope, I am here.
Oh, Clerk Shingari is here.
I
We're
voted
taking the-
aye.
Great, thank you very much. Kinsley Craig?
Aye.
Kelly Myers?
Aye.
Mr. Cheek? Still not on the line. Jennifer Harjo?
Aye.
Sorry, Jennifer?
Aye, I vote aye.
Thank you. Mr. Weed?
Aye.
Mr. Keister? Mr. Keister still not on. Mr. McCabe?
Aye.
Mr. McCabe?
Aye.
Thank you. And Sheriff Clemens? Sheriff Clemens still not on. That concludes the roll call.
Thank you, Emily. This is Jay Corping again. The motion to approve the minutes passes. At this point, I'd like to take an opportunity to recognize Chief Justice Paul Newby, who has joined us on the call. As we remember, we serve at the pleasure of the Chief Justice in this commission. And Chief Justice Newby, welcome. And I'd like to recognize you for any remarks you'd like to make today.
Well, thank you. First off, everybody, thank you for your hard work to make the constitutional principle that we shall have open courts and justice will be administered without favor, denial, or delay, making that a reality. I was reminded of the hard work and innovation of this committee as I have received reports from all over the state about folks getting back to the business of administering justice and doing so in a safe manner. I'm grateful that the governor has said that courthouse personnel are going to be frontline essential personnel to restart receiving vaccines from what I could tell March the 10th. And of course, anybody who is age challenged, like some of us may be, 65 and older, can go ahead and get their vaccines now. Also, recently, a couple of stories in Wall Street Journal and other publications, folks are thinking that along about April, we're going to see a combination of herd immunity with folks having been vaccinated, that it will begin to dramatically impact the numbers. And frankly, right now, statewide, the numbers are dramatically impacted. As y'all saw yesterday, the governor has changed or lessened some of the restrictions. So we do have to continue to exercise appropriate caution. And given the various challenges that this disease presents, on the other hand, I just thank everybody for their hard work. And speaking of hard work, when Judge Corpening is not co-chairing this committee, he also has a day job. And I was fortunate to be at the dedication of the New Hanover County Juvenile Justice Facility on Monday. Boy, talk about all the stakeholders working together, a lot of financial input by the county commissioners, no doubt Judge Corpening did a great job helping the commissioners appreciate the need for a new juvenile justice facility that really is a lot warmer, if you will, than a normal courthouse facility, emphasizing the rehabilitative, the redemptive nature of working with juveniles, and also the various family court issues that will be resolved there. State-of-the-art courtrooms. Judge Corpening, I expect that that courthouse facility will soon be the Corpening Courthouse. And I just thank you for all your hard work, although I'm sure the members of this commission would like to better understand why you are referred to as the Batman of New Hanover County. I'm still trying to figure that one out as an outsider. Caught all the references to Batman and Batcave and all these other things, but I understand that Wilmington may be your Gotham City, but still trying to figure out the rest of that. But seriously, everybody, I just couldn't be prouder of the work of this task force, the way that you are developing and disseminating these essential ideas statewide to all the stakeholders, and the fact that we've had so many jury trial resumptions and other, if you will, open courthouses without significant COVID issues is a real testimony to the work of this task force and the way that you've developed ideas and disseminated them. And frankly, all the stakeholders have bought in to your recommendations. So again, I thank everybody, and Judge Corpening, we're certainly grateful for your leadership in this arena as well. So thanks everybody for your participation. I'm going to hang on as long as I can, and then I have work of my court that daggone gets in the way of other things. So anyway, thank you so much.
Chief Justice Newby, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for your kind words. I'm actually coming to the meeting today from one of my new courtrooms. And it's my intention when we get a report on the new technology to give a panoramic view of the courtroom so that folks can actually see what that looks like. And thank you again for being at our ribbon cutting on Monday. Moving into the meeting, I'd like to say just a few words by way of opening comments. First, I'd like to recognize a new member to the task force. We have Martin County Clerk of Superior Court Tanya Leggett joining us as a new member. So Clerk Leggett, welcome. We are certainly glad to have you and look forward to working with you as we move forward in this work. Of course, when we add a new member, that means that a member is leaving. And so I'd like to recognize Clerk of Superior Court Marsha Johnson for her service over the last year on this task force. Clerk Johnson is retiring at the end of this month. A well-deserved retirement, Clerk Johnson, and we are so grateful for your service to this task force over the year. All of you will remember that Clerk Johnson has been an active participant in all of our work. So thank you, Clerk Johnson.
Thank you.
We also have some other new faces that have joined us and that have already taken a deep dive into the work of the task force. Director Drew Heath from the North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts is on the meeting with us, as is Deputy Director Ryan Boyce. General Counsel Trey Allen from the North Carolina Administrative Office of the Courts is also on the call. And the three of them have been very active with Judge Bridges and I in the last month or so in looking at the direction that we're going to move forward to. You know, and we've been doing this for almost a year. It's a little bit hard to believe that it's been almost a year. And all of you came together and worked quickly and furiously to address the emergencies that we were faced with. We put together information and documents and suggestions that I do think were well received by the field. And at this point, we think it's time for us to begin a look to the future. What innovations and advancements have we come up with during the time of COVID-19 that we need to continue to take advantage of moving into the future? What legislation needs to be enacted? what best practices can we adopt permanently? And then what can we do to make sure that we're prepared in the event we have another pandemic at some point in the future, so that we don't have to recreate the wheel? We can literally almost flip a switch and continuing doing the constitutionally mandated open court work that we do. So with that, we'll move into the agenda. And at this point, we'll move to the section on COVID innovations. And I'd like to recognize Judge Drew Heath, Director of the Administrative Office of the Courts, to speak about remote proceedings legislation.
Thank you very much, Judge Corpening and Judge Bridges, for your leadership on this task force, and everybody else who's a part of this task force. Really appreciate it. What Judge Corpening said is absolutely right. We want to have sort of a COVID innovations catalog. So we want, I think the vision is for this group to perhaps produce gather information, ideas, innovations that have come up as a result of COVID, and prepare a report for potential policy changes, courtroom best practices, and legislation that will capture the innovation so that we can bring them into the courtroom, into the judicial system, even after the pandemic lifts. So the early example of that has been the remote proceedings legislation that AOC drafted and distributed to many of the judges, and it got really good feedback. And I believe that Senators Britt and Daniel are working on their own draft of that legislation currently, a draft bill. So that's probably the best example. Anthony Whitmore is going to talk about technology that we think can be useful in that respect. And then a little bit later, I'm going to talk about some tools that we might have for reducing the pending case backlog. So Judge Corpening, is that something this group is interested in doing and preparing sort of a report that we can share with our colleagues across the state?
Yes, sir. I think so. I think that's and Judge Bridges, I'll also defer to you for your opinion on this as co-chair. But I think that can be an important part of our work moving forward.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And so, Judge Corpening, I guess I'll turn it over to Anthony Whitmore, who's got some really good information about technology.
Happy to recognize Mr. Whitmore. Thank you. Mr. Whitmore, I'm not sure if you're speaking, but you're still on mute.
I apologize for that. I had great things that I just shared. Again, I was saying I was so grateful, Judge Corpening, to see you there and all your technology working in your new courtroom, both the video and the network. So again, I think we have made some accomplishments based on some of the initiatives that came out of last year's task force. Technology recommendations. I had the opportunity, thank you for that, to work in the consultative capacity to the task force members. I'll share with you today, Emily, if you want to move to the next slide, please. I think we've been able to accomplish some of the task force recommendations, and I think we are positioned as well to potentially address some of the future task force recommendations. One of the things that I heard consistently from the task force was the need then to expand telework capabilities. This past year, AOC was able to address that. through additional laptops. We heard that there was various constituencies across AOC the need for increased laptops. We were able to do that, and at the same time, we considered what the future integrated case management system, ICS capabilities would need to be. So, for instance, where courtroom clerks would be able in the future, we could forego a desktop in their office environment, and they'd be able to take that laptop into the courtroom in the future. So with all those things considered, this past year, we were able to provide all of AOC's positions with the exception or including 50% of all FTE positions in clerk of court offices laptops in 2020. So the remaining 50% of the clerk positions that have desktops today, we have made with Judge Heath's input, we will be providing as counties go live on ICMS 6 months prior to, we will be committing to providing laptops for those folk and those FTEs throughout the case management system rollout over the next 2 to 3 years. Emily, if you want to forward to the next slide. This is just a little bit of a status on where we are. As you can see, in the April through July timeframe of last calendar, we deployed a little over 1,700 devices. Latter part of last year, we deployed an additional 1,200 devices. Total, a little over 3,000 laptop devices were deployed last calendar year, replacing desktops. We are now positioned to deploy an additional 200 laptops for the ICMS, the additional 50% of clerk of court FTEs that I mentioned earlier in the April-June timeframe. So I think we've made significant strides there in the telework capabilities. Emily, if you want to take me to the next slide, please. eCourtNet, or the network project. There were recommendations and there were concerns from last year's technology task force that do we have the bandwidth for some of the video conferencing needs that folks were thinking about that may be forthcoming in courtrooms. We're lucky to have already started the network project last calendar year. We're now into the implementation phase. The network project is a prerequisite for the case management system to improve bandwidth. This new network, we started in the November timeframe. We are scheduled to complete in the October timeframe this year. Our statewide rollout, we're replacing both infrastructure as well as providing new technologies. This new network is based on hybrid cloud technology. So some of you may be familiar with our case management system. It's going to be cloud hosted through Tyler Technologies, while we're going to also have our mainframe environment over the next 2 to 3 years as counties migrate. So therefore, that's what we refer to as that hybrid cloud architecture technology. There are going to be some systems we host internally over time within AOC. So this new hybrid cloud technology, network technology, will provide that. This new network is going to provide some of our video conferencing capabilities. We heard task force members have concern and thoughts about last year, such as the ability for judges to have breakout rooms to allow folks to be put in private video sessions so that they could discuss and then bring them back into the courtroom setting. So that is something we've been able to overcome over the last year and being rolled out to counties statewide. Actually, everyone should have that technology today. We're replacing analog fax machines as we go across the state with electronic faxing capability. This new network is also foundational for, we'll talk about more later, but our wireless initiative, where we're going to be able to expand wireless in court facilities across the state. Additionally, this network is a foundational initiative that's going to allow us to expand our video conferencing courtroom technology in the future. You want to take me to the next slide? I think we skipped one there, Emily. Again, this is a little bit of a status of where we are. I think you'll note in the May time frame, we'll be close to a 50% rollout statewide. We're making great progress as we go. The next slide, Emily. This is a little bit of a graphical representation of where we are. You can see we've started in the eastern part of the state, trying to move to the western part of the state before the hurricane season. We try to, based on seasonal potential issues, we try to hit those counties where we have less impact. Courthouse wireless. One of the things that we heard, or one of the advantages we wanted to take of this new network and efficiency to take advantage of these laptops that we're now going to have in judicial facilities, is to expand wireless. We were able and fortunate in 2020 to acquire all of our courthouse wireless infrastructure through COVID funds in 2020. So now we're in the process of determining what the budgetary costs will be for this implementation. We hope to, latter part of this year, be able to know exactly what the cost for folks to go out and actually implement wireless across all 100 counties latter part of this year. I'll be happy to take any questions. I know I'm rolling through this fast, but be happy to take any questions as we go, or save them to the end. And Emily, if anybody has any chat questions, slow me down as well. There was lots of discussion about video conferencing in this past task force. Some of the lessons learned and some of the things that we heard that were issues were courtroom audio, as well as video latency, inability to provide breakout sessions, and incompatibility with endpoint devices. We feel like working through our vendor and some of our business partners, the new version of WebEx, WebEx Teams, we've been able to overcome and address a lot of these issues that we heard last year. You can see we've had a significant increase on the right-hand side of the slide there. There's been a significant increase in the use of video throughout our court system, hearings, first appearances, and so forth. We continue to see, even this year, where that's going to continue to be an uptick. Next slide, please, ma'am. Again, this is another metric. All categories, number of participants, the use of video within WebEx meetings, and the total minutes. I think this all goes to show that while we didn't anticipate this need, AOC was prepared to be able to, one with the network and one with the video conferencing infrastructure that we had in place, to be able to meet some of this video conferencing and telework capability that the network would absorb this past calendar year. Next slide, please, ma'am. So, future work. One of the recommendations, I believe, came out of the technology task force was to improve our courtroom audio video capability. We invested time and effort this past year into what it would take to go into a courtroom, provide the infrastructure that would provide that immersive courtroom capability, integration with WebEx, high-definition monitors, cameras, audio integration, where we could take advantage of courtroom speakers, courtroom microphones, and integrate with the courtroom audio recording system. We were able to test what we now have as a configuration, what Judge Corpening now has there in New Hanover County. We were able to compatibility test with the executive branch, Department of Public Safety, folks, various detention centers across the state, compatibility. So we feel confident that our network that we're going to have in place and the infrastructure, courtroom infrastructure that we have now acquired through some COVID funding is going to allow us to provide a statewide rollout of courtroom video infrastructure across the state. If you can take me back to the next slide, I omitted talking about, if you look on the right-hand side of the slide there's a picture of a kiosk-type device in addition to the courtroom video conferencing technology. We have also acquired these desktop, as you can see there, video conferencing devices that will allow folks to be able to, if there are areas in the courthouse where you may want to have folks come into to reduce traffic in the courtroom, come in and do video conferencing, pro se folks or what have you. Now the next slide, please, ma'am. Again, AOC was fortunate to take advantage of COVID funds in 2020 to acquire audio video conferencing infrastructure that we feel like we can provide at least one configuration across the state, to one configuration per courtroom, potentially for others. Again, we're piloting something similar to the picture there in New Hanover County. Looking forward to the feedback there to lessons learned. Next slide, please, ma'am. Actually, I guess that concludes my presentation, discussion about what we have been able to address and what future technology innovations that AOC is targeting for the future. Any questions that I can answer?
Any questions for Mr. Whitmore?
So Anthony, I've got one. As I see it, we are now up over 10,000 WebEx meetings a month. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. I think that was the metric.
Thanks.
And Judge Heath, this is actually a real-time metric that we're monitoring daily down in our Network Operations Center. So we're able to gauge our network bandwidth, network capacity. So as we would be rolling out this new courtroom video conferencing technology, we'll be able to scale and adjust our capacity literally on demand if needed. For instance, if there's half of the state is doing video conferencing simultaneously across the state in courtroom settings.
Thank you.
Anthony, this is Kelly Myers in Wake County. The WebEx kiosk that you referred to, is that also the endpoint units? Is that also what they're called?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think we have 3 of those devices.
We
today.
do, and if I was making sure it was the same thing, and from my understanding, we have gotten wonderful feedback, rave reviews. The ones that are being used in our civil district courts are being used on multiple times a day. In fact, we had thought about trying to use them for some civil superior court, but they're being used so often in district court that they're not available very much. And so I just wanted to say kudos to your team for that. It's been a wonderful thing that people can show up in court and go into another room and sit down and be hardwired right into the WebEx hearing.
That's great to hear. Appreciate that. We have recently, as of next week, we're going to be using some of those devices actually in New Hanover County for a jury trial there, where the victim family will be coming into a separate room, and we'll have a second endpoint device in the courtroom to allow them to view testimony there. And I believe I just approved the same thing for a Wake County trial coming up in the next few weeks. as well as another county. But I can definitely see the value in addition to just folks coming in to do video conferencing. We can replace some of this mobile video cart requirements that we've had in the past. And obviously, Judge Corpening, there'll be a lot of value for juveniles to be able to have a private setting for hearings.
Thank you. Other questions? Well, I'd like to add my thanks. Anthony, your team has been incredibly responsive to the conversations that we had last year about this issue and the ability to enhance our ability to do remote hearings. I'm actually not connected to the new equipment yet. The vendor is here putting finishing touches on it. In fact, he came in to hang the cameras up over my head right when we were starting the meeting. But for those of you who couldn't see, I can turn my laptop so you can see just a little bit. There's a device that looks like an iPad that sits on the bench that actually controls the whole system. And on the far wall, I think you can see flat panel monitor. I've got a flat panel monitor on the two side walls and one in the rear. There's a camera array in front of me sitting just below the lip of the bench. There's a camera on the far wall pointed towards me, and there'll be a camera array above my head that will provide a wide angle view of the courtroom. All controllable by just the touch of the Cisco pad that's here on the bench. We've got the end user units, whatever they call the Desk Pro, the Cisco Desk Pro, in 2 observation rooms for each of our courtrooms, and intend to start putting that to use next week. So very excited about that, Anthony, and very grateful for the response of the Administrative Office of the Courts and in particular your team.
Thank you, sir. If I can put in one last plug, Kelly, those devices are touchless. They're voice activated. You can literally come in, hey, WebEx, call Judge Corpening, and there's magic behind the scenes.
All right, moving on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much for that update on technology. Judge Bridges, I'll turn the floor over to you at this point to talk about reactivating our Innovation and Technology Working Group.
All right. Thank you, Judge Corpening. This is Don Bridges, and just to follow up on a couple of things that have been said already, I think one of the keys to the success we have had so far in being able to get a lot of work done in a very short period of time during our sessions this past year has been in our separation of work out among our various work groups. We've been blessed with very good leadership among those work groups. Not only the best safety practices, the virus fatigue work group, but also our work group of innovative thinkers, the Innovations and Technology work group chaired by Judge Chuck Henry. Now, in fact, that work group was ready to move forward with some very forward-thinking ideas when we were in the process of submitting some previous reports. But we made a decision to hold off on some of those suggestions simply because at that time our focus was to try and deal with the pressing issues that COVID presented at that moment. We felt that we had about as much as we could handle to get a report together dealing with the immediate issues. So as Judge Corpening mentioned earlier, we're now at a point where we feel that some of the measures that we have taken during COVID have worked so effectively that some of those measures, at least, should become permanent measures, not necessarily out of caution, but simply because of the efficiency of those measures, that they are good ideas that can help create a more efficient better operating court system. And so we're planning to invite the Innovations and Technology Work Group to come back together and to take at least a twofold approach to their work at this point. One, to identify measures that might fall into that category, lessons learned so far from COVID, of things not only that we should continue doing into the future, but frankly, some ideas that we probably should have been doing all along in the past that we have now learned should become permanent. And then secondly, to revisit some of those longer term projects, including the possibility of additional legislative proposals that might be appropriate in a post-COVID era, learning some of the lessons that we've learned through COVID. I believe that Judge Henry had planned to join us on the call today. And Judge Henry may want to chime in and say a few words at this point about what his work group has done so far and what their vision might be at this point. Judge Henry, are you with us?
Judge Bridges, I am. Thank you very much. As you indicated to me a week or two ago, that it was your idea that we get that group back together. And I think that's a good idea to see how some of our suggestions, recommendations might have worked out, and maybe some that did not. We also before had talked about some issues and some suggestions and innovations that were obviously going to meet with some adversity. There's going to be viewpoints, areas of argument as to whether or not they wanted to go forward. It's not at least our group's intention that we're going to dictate how things are, what changes should be made, but we're just trying to raise them and let some of the other people that make the final decisions discuss it and decide how to go forward on even considering those suggestions. So it's going to be an open discussion among the group members, and hopefully we'll submit to you all some ideas that some may be great ideas, some maybe not so great ideas, but at least we'll give you something to work from. That's what I thought our job needs to be at this point. We are just beginning to reopen jury trials, so I don't think there's a lot of experience yet to rely upon in making suggestions, but we have thought of some ideas and look forward to seeing how they turn out as we get deeper into jury trials with a lot more experience to use and rely upon. So, Judge Bridges, that would be, I guess, what I believe our job will be going forward.
Thank you, Judge Henry, and we really appreciate the work this work group has produced so far, and look forward to more innovative thinking from you all as you tell us of the progress you'll make. And of course, at this point, we're just asking them to reconvene. They have not had an opportunity to meet yet, but we appreciate their willingness and Judge Henry's leadership in being able to get back together and move forward with additional recommendations in that regard. So, Judge Corfing, I'll offer the gavel back to you at this point, although I may have the next item on the agenda as well.
So, thank you, Judge Bridges. This is Jay Corpening again. Judge Henry, I'll add that I've already asked Chief District Court Judge Brad Allen, who is the president of the Conference of Chief District Court Judges, to appoint a work group to document the innovations and best practices that have occurred across our district courts. And they will be submitting that to you for your committee's use and consideration.
Well, they're certainly welcome. Great help. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Judge Bridges on this agenda item before we move on? All right, then Judge Bridges, I'll pass it back to you for jury trial resumption best practices.
Yes, sir. This is Don Bridges again. And as you all know, we have resumed jury trials in many of our districts. Because of the spike in COVID cases during the past couple of months, many districts, mine included, had planned on resuming jury trials at a somewhat earlier date, and then those plans got postponed again. In the case of my home district, a two-county district, notwithstanding orders entered previously by former Chief Justice Beasley that would have allowed us to resume jury trials back in late 2019, given our local situation, we made a conscious decision to try to begin our jury trials in January of 2021. When the cases spiked around Christmas time, we again made a conscious decision to postpone that resumption until at least February, which we have now done. We had our first week of jury trials last week. We had our second week of jury trials this week. Now, there are a number of other districts that had an earlier experience, and as those districts were beginning to report back that they were resuming jury trials and that some were doing so with more success than others, we were curious about what their experience had been. So with the help of the Administrative Office of the Courts, there was a survey that was crafted and disseminated among Superior Court judges throughout the state asking for information about their experience with the resumption of jury trials. We received a number of responses to that survey and then followed up on those responses by having multiple Zoom or WebEx conferences among many of those Superior Court judges, which were coordinated together with the Administrative Office of the Courts and the School of Government at the University of North Carolina. One of the persons who assisted in that coordination was Professor Shay Denning, and she has been involved in a couple of aspects about that. And I have invited Professor Denning to join us today to go into more details about what was revealed by those surveys. We have also kept recorded minutes of those conferences, which were then transposed into a report format that we've tried to pare down into a more comprehensive report that might be disseminated to local stakeholders for their benefit to learn from the experiences of the judges who early on conducted jury trials. And I would like to invite Professor Denning to talk to us not only about the survey, but also the form of that report. Professor Denning, are you with us now?
I'm here. Thank you, Judge Bridges.
Okay. Thank you, Shay.
I'm going to attempt to share my screen and hope that I have success in that endeavor. So let's see here. Are you all now seeing the screen that says jury trial survey results?
We are, thank you.
Okay, great. So I'm going to just kind of walk through what we learned from the AOC survey that was conducted again in the second and third weeks of December 2020, which in COVID times is somehow forever ago because the situation changes so quickly, and courts have been operating really in a fast changing environment. But this is at least a snapshot in time from what we gained, what we learned from that survey. So judges were asked whether they had been scheduled to preside over a jury trial, and 100 judges responded. 32 of those judges said yes, they had been scheduled. 31 of those judges who said they had been scheduled were Superior Court judges, and there was one district court judge who said that she had been scheduled to preside over a jury trial. 68 of the respondent judges said no, they had not been asked to preside over a jury trial. Of those judges, a much smaller subset reported that a jury had been impaneled. So 22 Superior Court judges presided over cases, had presided over cases by mid-December in which a jury had been impaneled. Some of those Superior Court judges presided over multiple trials, and I'll get to that in just a minute. 10 of the judges who responded that they had been scheduled to preside over a jury trial responded that a jury was not impaneled. There were multiple reasons given in those 10 cases as to why a jury had not been impaneled. 2 of the responding judges said that plans changed because of the increase in COVID cases in their district. One responded that there actually had been a COVID outbreak in the courthouse, and so that resulted in a jury not being impaneled. 3 of the judges said the cases had just resolved themselves, so sort of a normal course of business explanation for why those juries were not impaneled. 1 reported that an attorney had traveled out of state and then could not comply with a COVID-19 certification. So this must have been some sort of local procedure that had been enacted that the attorney was not able to comply with. 2 of the judges reported that either a juror or a juror's family member had tested positive. And 1 of the respondents said that a jury was not impaneled because an insufficient number of jurors had responded to the summons. I think the way the survey was drafted, perhaps the thinking was that that might be a driving reason as to why a jury was not impaneled, but that turned out to be the reason in only 1 of the cases. These trials occurred all over the state, so you can't really say that they occurred in one particular type of district or one particular area of the state. From west to east, east to west, in 24 counties. So there was not a kind of a regional difference in where the trials took place. These were the judges who presided over the jury trials, and I thought that maybe we should just have a picture of one single Superior Court judge who could provide the task force with all the advice about conducting jury trials, because you'll see that there's one judge on this list who by mid-December had already had 5 jury trials. All of the others, most of the others had just had 1. Some of them, 6 of them had had 2, but Judge Josh Willey had had 5 already by mid-December. So he may be able to give everybody all kinds of advice about what he learned. And he, in fact, has given that advice in some of the other settings that Judge Bridges referred to. Jury trials primarily, in total, we're talking about 32 jury trials. When you consider there were 22 judges, the multiple cases, so we're talking about 32 cases. Of those 32 cases in which a jury was impaneled, most of them were criminal cases. So 27 of them were criminal cases and 5 were civil cases. How long did they take? The time varied. By far, most of them, 27 of them, fell within the 2 to 3 day range. 2 of them were 1 or less days, and then 3 were 4 to 5 days. I do recall in some of those discussions that Judge Bridges referred to, some of the judges talking about how cases that were taking 2 to 3 days might have been of the 1 day or less variety in a pre-COVID world. So there was this widespread notion and a perception shared that a COVID trial takes longer than a regular trial. So a trial that enacts safety precautions necessary from COVID is going to extend over a bit of a longer period of time. And the last piece of data that the AOC gathered in that survey was how the cases were resolved. And so this was pretty interesting. I think there may have been concern that it wouldn't be worth getting a trial started because you wouldn't be able to finish it. That turned out not to be the case for most of these trials. So 25 of them proceeded to jury verdict. 1 of them was resolved, as jury trials not infrequently are, by some other mid-trial plea or dismissal of the charges. 2 of them were COVID mistrials. 3 were mistrials for other reasons. And there was 1 other, which is a COVID-related other. The defendant began to experience COVID-like symptoms in the middle of the trial. And so the trial was continued, according to the survey, to some later week in December. And I don't know what the follow-up is as to why that happened. But that's really just a snapshot of the information that that we received in the survey. And there's a much more detailed Excel spreadsheet. And I suppose Judge Bridges just wanted to save you the horrors of scrolling through tab after tab of the AOC spreadsheet to look at what was going on. So those are just the highlights. Does anybody have any particular questions about those survey results? No. So Judge Bridges, because you worked a lot more intimately than I did on the preparation of the overall report, if it's okay with you, I might like to kick it back to you to talk a little bit more about that area of the work, if you don't mind picking up that baton.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part of what you were saying.
Oh, I just was saying.
Kick it back to talk about which aspect?
Just this report, kind of the aspect of the report and the kinds of things that are contained therein.
Okay. And I would welcome input from other folks as well, particularly Judge Sermons, I know is on the call, and Judge Sermons has been very actively involved in the planning for the resumption of jury trials. And I believe that Judge Summons has had some jury trials already as well. But it seems to me that there are a few points at least that jump out at us from this experience. And frankly, many of these are the kinds of points that our task force predicted. A number of you provided input of what you considered to be important considerations. I remember specifically some of the comments that were made by Clerk Johnson at the time we were drafting this report about from the viewpoint of the elected clerks as well as the jury clerks and the importance of involving them in the process. We had heard from a number of you about the importance of doing walkthroughs at the site with all of the various stakeholders involved so that we could hear the differing perspectives of the various people who are involved. Some of those people are focusing on the security aspects. Some of those people are more concerned about the how good the acoustics are in the courtroom, even though that should be a sensitive issue for all of us. More were focusing on the defendant's rights of confrontation and cross-examination. So because we had various stakeholders involved, we were able to get a more balanced perspective. But there are a number of points that kind of jumped out at me from what we heard from the judges and their experiences on jury trials so far. One of those that we heard over and over was the point that we should consider carefully the number of jurors that would need to be summoned during these early day resumption of jury trials, because one of the factors that we discovered almost universally in the early trials was that the actual attendance rate of jurors summoned was lower than we had experienced in the past during the COVID era. And that in some instances, that attendance rate was extremely low. I'm happy to report that in the first 2 weeks within my district, we had a juror attendance rate of about 33.33%, as compared with what our experience had been pre-COVID of typically 50 to 65% of jurors summoned would actually show up for jury duty. So, in other words, our attendance rate was maybe half or a little bit better than what we'd seen in the pre-COVID era. But I think one of the things that's pretty predictable is that at least in these early days, your attendance rate of jurors is not going to be as high as you have experienced in the past, so you ought to take that into account in the number of jurors that are summoned. The second point that jumps out at us, and boy did it ever, in my personal experience in the early jury trials, is everything takes longer. We've experienced that both in a jury setting as well as in non-jury settings. Everything seems to take longer with the COVID precautions, so you need to factor that into your planning. Probably to double or even triple the amount of trial time that will be required for a case. And then the third point that comes to my mind is, again, the importance of doing actual on-site walkthroughs together with these various stakeholders, and not to assume that one or two people who may be either the official or unofficial people in charge of COVID protocols don't leave the planning to one or two people. Have actual on-site walkthroughs with various stakeholders who are going to be able to present those various perspectives in doing your preparation for jury trials, and then in going back and doing your review after your early jury trials of how things went, which also leads to a fourth point. Many of the judges and the clerks talked about their use of questionnaires to jurors, both for health screening purposes as they came in, but then post-trial questionnaires to invite the jurors to provide feedback about their experience and make suggestions as to how that situation might have been handled better. And we heard a number of people who were very impressed with the information they got from the use of those formal questionnaires. So those would be the points I would add. And Shay, thank you for your work in this regard. I think it's been very helpful. We had great facilitators with you and your colleagues in bringing about the discussion from the judges that produced the information that was contained in this report and helping compile this data. So we certainly appreciate your efforts in that regard.
Thank you, Judge Bridges. One final thing I would say that came up in some of those discussions and is reflected in the draft report and frankly ties into some of the earlier discussion about technology and carrying over lessons learned to the future is the idea that facilitating defense counsel's ability to meet with incarcerated people through remote means can help in COVID times and possibly in post-COVID times to keep cases moving along. And so that was something that was discussed, was exploring what kinds of technology solutions there might be on that front, and there was some interest in that. So thank you.
Again, Shay, thank you very much for your work in this area. And I will ask, are there questions or comments from other task force members? I particularly would be interested if Judge Sermons has anything he would like to add to this discussion.
Well, yeah, I guess we talked about it all in our December meeting. By that time, my district had done 6 jury trials in 3 counties over 2 weeks. I did 4 of them myself. But Shay, I'm so sorry. I didn't do your survey because I forgot. So that may have skewed your results.
And so you got no shout out, Judge Sermons. I'm sorry.
Don't need any shout outs. The main takeaways that I have, Don hit on, but I'll put them in real time perspective. I just did my first civil jury trial on Monday in Washington County, Plymouth. It was a motor vehicle accident, and liability was admitted. Proximate cause was the issue. We not only went over on Thursday we did it off-site at a large family life center and a church. Very, very willing people there to accommodate us. But we had everybody there. And then because it was a church, we had to go back over on Sunday and set it up. And I went to both meetings. And if I hadn't, it wouldn't have been done the way it should have been done. And I know most of the people that are on the bench are going to say, look, Sermons, we ain't doing all that. And that's justified. But if you don't, something's going to go wrong. My TCC and I have done that. But for a civil case last week, the week before, we did it this Monday, but the week before, we did all motions in limine. I made them give me the witness lists. I made them give me the exhibit list. They prepared notebooks. Nobody got up. Nobody passed anything to the jurors. They all had their own set for each juror. And I had my charge done, and they approved it last week. So everything was preloaded, and we actually tried a 4-witness civil case, including picking the jury, on Monday. The jury came back at 4:30 with their verdict, and we were done. Got one off the book. So that's an easy one. It was a very simple issue. It was a proximate cause issue. The jury didn't take long to do it. The jury selection was short. So that's a good thing to start with. But going through the process of planning every step that everybody takes that's going to walk in your facility is what is the judges and the court's responsibility. My other observations are that after our trials in December, that each side had issues, and the state had issues of masks. The state had issues of saying the witnesses couldn't be heard by the very last juror when they're in the left side of the audience as a jury box. They were worried about not being able to see the jurors' faces in jury selection. And I understand that. And I just don't, and I ask everybody from the defense bar to all the DAs was, well, everybody's subject to the same restrictions. You know, it's kind of like if it's raining on the golf course, everybody has to play in the rain. It's kind of like anything else that you do, but this is much more important. I understand that. But there's some things that during this time period we're kind of shackled with, and being safe is one of them. We also had something happen in January here in Beaufort County. The first time we tried to get the grand jury back, we only had 11 grand jurors and could not get, despite calling, sending people to their houses. They had COVID, they had other issues. We could not get a quorum to have indictments heard. And 2 weeks later, we almost had the same thing, and we had to end up going and getting somebody from work who forgot to make 12 to get indictments. So the other counties, though, we haven't had those issues. I agree, Don, jury selection, jury response usually is about 40%. During COVID, it's been between 30 and 35%. So you're going to get a third of the people that you summon. So 120 is not enough. Do 150 if you're a small county. I don't know how the large counties do it, but a third is about all you're going to get. So we start, we don't have any next week, but then the 8th, we have several. The 15th, we're rolling every jury session we have on the calendar. We're calling in juries. So that's about it.
Judge Sermons, thank you for that. I appreciate your input. I did mention everything's going to take longer. And it's going to be slower. But once again, Judge Sermon shows he can do it. He does a 4-witness civil trial in one day. It's going to take longer unless you're as good as Judge Sermons is. And he is.
Cases were. How about that?
He is outstanding. I always think of his analogy of saying that the senior resident is kind of like the coach on an athletic team, and part of that senior resident's job is to motivate the players and get everybody operating together as a team.
That's right.
And there's no doubt that he's been effective in doing that in his home district. We appreciate that. Do we have other questions or comments from other members of the task force about this topic? Our goal here is to get this report that you all have in a form that we can disseminate that hopefully will be helpful to people throughout the state that are in the field. Maybe some of them haven't had this level of experience yet in jury trials, but do you all have other questions or comments?
This is Patrick Weed. Just one question. As part of the survey, was there any feedback as to whether there are any positive tests following any of the jury trial sessions, 7-10 days later, either among jurors or any of the participants?
I don't recall any report of that, but there were some reports of participants of trials being interrupted because of positive tests during the proceedings. Shay, can you add anything to that? Do you recall any reports of positive tests in the days after jury trials from any of these people who provide information on the survey?
That was not a question that was asked, and so we don't have that result from the survey. Though, as Judge Bridges mentioned, we can tell that in at least 2 cases, the trial was interrupted because a juror, and then in another case, the juror's spouse tested positive for COVID. So we don't have the specific data that you're asking about, at least not in this survey.
Okay, thanks.
This is Jay Corpening. It did come up in the discussion, the facilitated discussion we had, led by Jim Drennan and Willow Jacobson from the School of Government. That did come up in the discussion, and no one mentioned post-trial positive cases, but we did have those 2 situations that interrupted trials. And I think we had about 20 or 22 Superior Court judges participate in that discussion. Lasted over a couple hours.
Do we have other questions or comments?
Judge Bridges, Judge Harrell had Judge Henry had a trial in Duplin County which he suspended when the defendant indicated he was feeling ill. And he continued the trial for about a week or so to make sure that the defendant was fine. They started up again, and the defendant indicated again that he was feeling ill. And Judge Harrell, I think with the consent of the defendant, declared a mistrial. I didn't think, I agreed with him because of the fact that we were interrupting these jurors' lives, at least 13 or 14 of them. And asked them to come back a week after that. I think they're getting into the Christmas season, declared a mistrial. And so he was unsuccessful in bringing that case to a close or to a verdict. But that's an example of what we had thought about and knew it was going to come up. And you got to, make decisions based upon safety as opposed to what was actually the medical situation at the time. And I totally agree with the decisions he made.
I've got a question.
Thank you, Judge Henry. Again, I think one of our goals here is to try and put this information in a form that it can be disseminated to the folks who are out in various counties doing this work and trying to get this work cranked up again. So my question to the group is, do you all feel comfortable with the form in which we've now presented this information? Is it sufficiently detailed and helpful that it's something we can disseminate to the field at this time?
Judge Bridges, I've got a question for Shay, if you don't mind.
Okay.
It looks like we've heard from Judge Bridges and Judge Sermons, both of whom I have a tremendous amount of respect for. It sounds like they may have had different experiences. Judge Bridges experiencing some delays because of COVID, and Judge Sermons on the other end of the spectrum banging out a 4-witness civil trial in a day. Did your survey tend to show that there were not, on the whole, big delays because of COVID?
So you can't really ascertain that from the survey, because the survey simply asked how long did the trial you conducted take, and people chose either under a day, 2 to 3 days, or 4 to 5 days. I didn't draft the survey, so I don't actually know quite how that question was worded, sort of what the menu options were. I will say that in the discussions that I have participated in that have been about people's experiences, many voices in the room have said, this all takes longer, add extra time. So that has been the prevailing sentiment in those discussions. And one thing I would say is Judge Sermons shared that amazing tale of getting it done in a day, but I think that day was preceded by going out there on Sunday and lining everything up. And so even in that recounting, it sounds like there was some extra time spent, but I'd say overall, the people I have heard from, again, I don't have survey data, it's all anecdotal, it sounds like it does take a bit longer.
Thank you. And
this is Waylon. You got to add in all the preloaded time. If you don't do, it's kind of like studying for exam for a week, and it takes an hour to let the professor know you know the stuff and you get an A. Well, if we hadn't done everything we did the week before, we would have been able to do it in 2 days. And so that made the difference. So, and your other question was about the interruption because of COVID. and the trials we had November 30th week and December 8th or whatever it was, looking back on it, I think we were just incredibly lucky. Just incredibly lucky that we didn't have somebody positive in the jury, somebody positive in the staff, somebody positive, the juror's family. So I'm not sure that the takeaway from my success those 2 weeks is anything but maybe dumb luck at some point without having it interrupted by COVID. We didn't have any other delays on it because they were essentially shorter matters. And Judge Willie tried 2 of the ones we tried. So 2 of his 5 were in my district using our rules. And but he did have 2, and he actually stayed till Friday of that whole week here in Beaufort County. So.
Great. And Shay, do you all plan to do another round of survey? Maybe as we start into this, getting through the backlog effort?
So we'd be happy to help with that. I'll say again, this was a survey that came out of AOC in December, and so that's the method in which it was distributed before. But we'd be happy to help build a survey and send it out to folks, or have you all send it out to folks and look at the data. So we don't have specific plans to do that, but if there is interest, completely happy to work something up.
Thanks.
All right. Are there other questions and comments in this area? Judge Corpening, I'll turn the meeting back over to you, and then we can proceed however you deem appropriate as to any action that we may take with respect to the survey results and the report.
Thank you, Judge Bridges. This is Jay Corpening again. If it's the will of the group, then I think it's an appropriate time for a motion to approve this report in its form and its dissemination to the field, and also to the Chief Justice for his use. But I don't speak for the group, so if someone's willing to make a motion to approve this report in its current form, glad to hear from you.
Judge Corpening, this is Kelly Myers, and I did let Ryan Boyce know about one typo that's on page 3, so I would just add that we would approve it with that typo corrected. And if so, then I will move to approve the report as is.
All right, thank you. Motion is made. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Elisa Chin-Gary, Mecklenburg County Clerk.
Thank you, Clerk Chin-Gary. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Right, hearing none, then Emily, we're ready for a roll call vote to vote aye to approve the motion or nay to disapprove it.
Sure. Judge Corpening?
Aye.
Judge Bridges?
I vote aye.
Judge Thurman?
I vote aye, but would wonder whether I probably need to fill out the survey so Shay would have accurate results. But subject to that, I vote aye.
Judge Vincent?
Aye.
Mr. West?
Aye.
I don't believe DA Evans has joined us. Clerk Johnson?
Aye.
Clerk Leggett?
Aye.
Clerk Chin-Gary?
Aye.
Sorry, Clerk Chin-Gary, I don't believe we recorded your vote.
I voted aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Kinsley Craig?
I vote aye.
Kelly Myers?
Aye.
Mr. Cheek, I saw you joined us.
Yep, I vote aye.
Jennifer Harjo,
I vote aye.
oh, looks like Jennifer unfortunately had to
I vote
leave.
aye. I'm still here.
Oh, okay, great, thank you.
Well,
Sorry, I didn't see you on
have
the
to leave in a minute, so I apologize for leaving the meeting early.
No, that's all right, thank you. Mr. Weed,
Aye.
Mr. Keister, I saw you joined us as well.
I did, and I vote aye.
Mr. McCabe,
Aye.
and I believe Sheriff Clemens is still absent.
Emily, Mr.
That
Harrison
concludes
is
the roll call.
here. Emily, Mr. Harrison
Mr.
is here, but he doesn't have audio. He has voted aye in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone, for your work, and in particular, thanks to the School of Government, Shay Denning, Willa Jacobson, and Jim Drennan for their help in facilitating the conversation with the Superior Court judges. We'll move now to the next item on the agenda, conversation led by Director Superior Court Judge Drew Heath on reducing pending case backlog. So, Director Heath.
Thank you, Judge. We're trying to assist and equip you all so we can get out of this backlog. First thing that we tried to do was provide you with some information about the pending case mix. So it looked like we had a little bit over a 15% increase in pending cases at the end of 2020 versus the end of 2019. Our data folks, Brad Fowler's team, said that was sort of a modest uptick. Some years the swing is 10% and higher, even when there is no COVID. So we tried to peel the onion and see what the mix of cases was like. We tried to provide you all with felony cases pending, misdemeanor appeals pending, DWIs pending, and I believe some other district court case pending reports. Those were circulated, and we tried to have WebEx availability in case anybody wanted to call in and get a little bit more explanation of those numbers. We hosted 3 of those meetings. We're available if anybody wants to call in and have a one-on-one meeting about their county or their district to try to see what's really going on in those numbers. We've also reached out to Chuck Spahos to get the Conference of District Attorneys to add some color commentary to their case mix data. So we're just, number one, trying to provide you with some information. Number two, we want to provide you with some resources. So we just authorized temporary workers. We authorized compensation for overtime payment and the use of emergency judges. So hopefully that will help as we dig into these cases and try to get out of this backlog. Anthony already has mentioned some of the technology that we're trying to make available. Laptops, we have MiFi, remote wireless that we can push out. We started in Wake County with the WebEx kiosks as a pilot. As Kelly Myers has said, that was well received. We expanded the pilot program to 10 counties. I'm not sure exactly where we are in deployment, but I know that Anthony and his team are working very hard to get those out, and we're going to expand it even further so that with those WebEx kiosks, we can increase the use of remote proceedings. We can enable members of the public to interact with the clerk's office staff and others remotely rather than face-to-face. So those are just some of the things we're trying to do. Ryan or Trey, did I leave out anything? I don't think so. So the only other thing is, as with the COVID innovations, we would like to know if you all have developed best practices in your county or district that we could share with other counties across the state. For example, I know Judge Ammons, who I don't think is on the call, in Cumberland County, he has a procedure where he uses an empty courtroom to assist with the space requirements for jury selection. I know he's rocking and rolling, doing jury trials right now. I know that Ben David in New Hanover County, the DA, is setting the jury in the gallery rather than in the jury box, and that's allowing them to accommodate the social distancing. So just ideas like that, just creative solutions that people are incorporating into their processes. We want to gather that and then disseminate that information. So I think that's all I had. Does anybody have any questions for me about what AOC can do for you? All right.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that update, Director Heath.
Judge
Bridges,
Corpening, could I
Yes,
direct a question or really more of a comment toward to Judge Heath? Judge Heath, one thing that I hope the administrative office will be aware of and sensitive to, one of the things that we talked about with this group last year was what we called virus fatigue. And one of the things that I am experiencing, particularly in my district right now, and this is not just COVID, this is due to the fact that our district has reached a tipping point with regard to indigent appointments. So our local bar has been very overextended with indigent appointed criminal cases here. And in fact, we're working with some folks in the legislature trying to expedite some help for us in the form of a public defender here. But at least from my personal experience, I think there are a lot of folks throughout the state who, despite the public misapprehension or misperception that the courts have been shut down entirely during the past year, I think there are a lot of folks throughout the state who have worked extremely hard during this time just trying to keep that backlog of cases from developing. And so as we work in coming months trying to move some of these cases that have been pending, I hope that one of our approaches will be for us to work harder and with better resources, or work smarter with better resources rather than simply working harder. Because at least in our district, I see a lot of people who are almost at the end of their rope. We've had a number of attorneys that have asked to withdraw from appointed work altogether because they're so exhausted with it. We've seen some other folks on the verge of breakdowns because they've been going so hard. So I do think it's important for us to keep that in mind as we set about our work of trying to deal with the pending cases that have developed over the past year. And I hope we can all be sensitive to that.
Yes, sir. Just get with me and let me know what you might need. If it's a legislative solution, we'll try to work on that.
Yeah, and as I said, we're working on that to some extent already in our district, but I do think that's an issue that all of us need to be mindful of, and I hope we will. So.
All right, thank you, Judge Bridges. Thank you, Director Heath. And Judge Bridges, I think we had spoken about referring this issue to the Innovations and Technology Committee to see if they could identify any innovations that could help with reducing backlog in addition to what the Administrative Office of the Courts is already doing.
Yes, sir. I think that's right.
So, Judge Henry, if you can tackle that as well as you guys reconvene.
Thank you, Judge Henry. I'm making note of it right now.
Right, that concludes our published agenda for the day. Any closing comments by members? trying to allow for mute lag time or unmute lag time. All right, hearing none, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Special thanks to folks who have helped us with our presentations today, Judge Heath, Anthony Whitmore, Professor Denning. Thank you so much for joining us today and for your valuable input. We will get the Innovation Technology Committee back together, and then we will reconvene this group. Judge Bridges, my thinking is in about 4 weeks. Not sure if that's your line of thinking or not.
I would think 4 to 6 weeks. I think a lot of that is going to depend upon how long it takes to get our report back from the Innovations and Technology Committee.
All right, then I think we'll track that work and then we'll make a decision about reconvening. But I want to thank everybody for your work. Judge Bridges, thank you for your service as co-chair. Any closing remarks you'd like to make, sir?
No, sir.
All right, with that will conclude our meeting for today. We'll stand adjourned. Thank you once again, everyone, for your tireless efforts on this matter.